Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 14th of September 2021. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, had a little bit of drama on, not Twitter, not just Twitter, but like crypto in general last night. I think happened about 1 or 2 hours after I recorded yesterday's Refuel, but basically there was a bit of fake news that came out that Walmart was accepting LTC Litecoin for payments. Now, this was kind of crazy. I went on Twitter. Everyone was talking about it. There were legitimate kind of like mainstream news outlets like Reuters, CNBC, a few others out there. I think, Zero Hedge. I mean, there was a fair few, and I saw them on Twitter basically saying, this actually happened, right? This was real. And then the official Litecoin Twitter account also tweeted out that it was kind of real and that it happened. Then they later deleted the tweet. I think it was just like a few minutes later or something like that. So there was a lot of confusion. And of course, the price of LTC just skyrocketed as soon as this announcement was made, even though it was fake. No one knew it was fake for the first few minutes. So the price went from I think $175 to $235 within like 10 minutes or something. Absolutely crazy. And Litecoin's usually not really doing much, right? It's an old kind of like fork of Bitcoin. It's not really used for much. No one really talks about it. So its price just sits sideways a lot of the times, unless the market heats up and people are just kind of speculating on it. But because of this massive price move, and then it came out that the news was fake, and I think the price was still hovering around $210 or something. At that point, I was like, okay, how can I short this? Like, this was just the most obvious short to me ever. I never do kind of like shorting or kind of like leverage trading in general. I've been doing a little bit on dYdX just to test out the platform, playing around with it because it's a layer 2. But I asked myself, like, where can I do this? And I don't have any funds on centralized exchanges or anything like that. I don't even want to use them, to be honest. So I was like, okay, well, I went to dYdX. I'm like, oh wow, they have an LTC market because it's a perpetual exchange. It's all synthetic. So there's no need to have like an LTC token on Ethereum to have a market on dYdX. They can just spin up markets as long as there's a price feed for it. So essentially, what ended up happening was that I opened up this short on LTC with whatever funds I had on there. I don't have too much money on there. It's tiny amounts, but I did it on there, and I kind of like opened up this short, and then I closed it when LTC went back to pretty much the price that it started at. I think it was like $180 or something like that. And I was like, okay, well, that was a little bit of easy money right there. But it's not really about the money. What I found really funny was the fact that I was able to kind of, trade LTC using a layer 2 perpetual exchange built on Ethereum. And LTC isn't the only thing that I've actually shorted lately. I shorted Solana at the top. I shorted Cardano before the smart contracts came out. And as I said, like, this isn't big money here. This is really small amounts of money just because I was playing around with the exchange. But I shorted those and I actually made a little bit of money on it. And I was like, okay, this is fun, right? And so I've kind of like just been trading more often on dYdX now, just kind of like something fun to do. But I thought it was kind of ironic that I was able to short quote unquote Ethereum killers using a layer 2 on Ethereum as well, which was quite funny for me. But anyway, I think what I really wanted to talk about was what I wrote about in the newsletter as well today on this topic, where basically Ethereum is kind of like our home, right? Like, we can do pretty much like everything we want on Ethereum. None of these other chains, from what I can see, offer anything distinctly unique. They may have unique apps, but the apps will do the same as what the ones on Ethereum do. And yes, they may have cheaper fees and things like that. But the thing is, Ethereum's high fee environment, I think, will, like within the next few months, be like a thing of the past for most users. I do believe most users will just live on layer 2. They'll be using whatever it is, Optimism, Arbitrum, the Polygon POS chain, if they want to use that, kind of like these NFT layer 2s like Immutable, using dYdX, whatever. I'm bridging between them and things like that. I don't think a lot of users are going to be sitting on layer 1 anymore. So really, I look at these other chains. I'm like, okay, well, what else can I do here that I can't do on Ethereum? And there really isn't anything else. A lot of them use incentive programs or yield farming programs to attract liquidity. And okay, I mean, if I wanted to, I could go there and do some yield farming and then take the profits back to Ethereum. But the thing is that I'm going back to Ethereum. There is no way I would ever actually sit on that chain with those profits. I would take them straight back to Ethereum, where it's like my home. It's where I feel most secure. And kind of like I just put it probably back into ETH at that point. whether that be on layer 1 or layer 2. And this isn't to say that there aren't kind of chains out there doing innovative stuff or kind of like innovative apps on those chains, but I could still come back to it and be like, okay, well, if something spins up on another chain that is innovative, then what's to stop it from just being kind of like cloned or another project coming along and competing with them, but doing it on a layer 2 on Ethereum? And I know that, depending on the layer 2, the fees are definitely, higher than these other kind of competing chains and stuff like that. And I totally get that. But I don't know, like I'm trying not to sound like an ETH maxi or whatever you want to call me here, but I really, like, given the choice between Ethereum layer 2s, which are, and ones that are properly constructed and fully kind of like decentralized, no guardrails, whatever, and kind of like living on Ethereum, and an entirely new chain, I would choose Ethereum layer 2s any day of the week, even with their centralized controls, to be honest, because I think that there's a stronger base there. It's the tooling's much better. As I said, like, there's not many kind of unique things happening on these other chains or whatever. Besides, I guess, the yield farms that you can kind of like. We were making some funny comments about this in the Daily Gwei Discord the other day. We were saying kind of like Vikings going to pillage these these chains and then just bringing all the spoils back home. And that's exactly what I think is happening. I mean, I've talked about how I think Ethereum is like an economic nexus before, where everything's just going to be bridging in and out of Ethereum, but Ethereum really is going to be at the center point of this whole ecosystem because it is the most secure, most decentralized chain. It is where everyone has kind of like grown up. It's what they call their home. But of course, there's going to be new users that come in and that will never use Ethereum. They'll use the other chains, whatever. They'll be happy doing that. That's totally fine. But I do think that a lot of these users will also use layer 2s. They may not ever use layer 1 because they just, to be honest, they're just priced out of using layer 1 Ethereum, but they'll use these layer 2s, and potentially they won't even know that these layer 2s are built on Ethereum. Like, for example, if Coinbase was to do a bridge directly from their exchange to dYdX, like say withdraw from your ETH wallet on Coinbase to your wallet on dYdX, would you know, like as a new user, would you know that dYdX is a layer 2 on Ethereum? Unless you actually search for it, I don't think it gives you an indication. I don't think it just blasts you with it and say, hey, we're built on Ethereum or anything like that. And there's going to be plenty of apps like that are built on these other kind of protocols, these layer 2 protocols like Arbitrum and Optimism, and they won't explicitly say they're on Ethereum, and users just won't know. And a lot of users won't even know because they'll just be accessing it through through kind of like different front ends, whether that be mobile wallets, like Argent, for example, or even kind of like a centralized institution like a bank or whatever. So it's kind of funny when you think about that, is that a lot of new users coming into this space won't even know that they're kind of like using Ethereum, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think if we abstract, at the end of the day, Ethereum is back-end technology for most of the world, but it is also a movement. It is also, for us who spend more time in the ecosystem, it's something that we are ideological about, something that we form a community around, but that doesn't mean that the mass adoption has to happen in such that people have to know they're using Ethereum. I mean, at the end of the day, we all use Linux, and most people don't know about it because it's back-end infrastructure. People only know about Windows because it's plastered in your face. When you kind of like use Windows, it's everywhere. It reminds you that you're using Windows. Same with Mac and things like that. But they're kind of like brands and they're centralized companies and all that sort of stuff. Whereas with Ethereum, these kind of like things can be built on top. So you could imagine Ethereum being that back-end infrastructure and companies building on top, just like Linux is a back-end infrastructure for a lot of the top tech companies in the world. They use Linux to run on their servers. They use all sorts of different kind of tools in the background as well that end users just don't know of. And I think it's just the phenomenon of how early we are that people know about Ethereum as a technology and Ethereum as kind of like powering all this sorts of stuff. And I do think that the balance will be shifted towards more people knowing about Ethereum because it's got a token attached to it. Like if Linux had a token attached to it, then of course people would buy the Linux token or the Linux share or stock or whatever you want to call it, and more people would know about it. But because it doesn't, and because it just sits in the background, it can still power the entire world without anyone knowing about it. But the benefit of Ethereum is the fact that it can power the entire world while people still know about it because you can bet on it. You can buy ETH and you can kind of like buy all the other tokens and stuff like that as well, which I think is really cool. But yeah, just wanted to kind of give a little bit of color around how I'm thinking about this and how I'm thinking that Ethereum just is going to remain the center point of the crypto ecosystem. I think Bitcoin lost it quite a while ago because it doesn't support smart contracts. And actually, maybe I should talk a little bit about this as well as an aside here. So people often kind of like, I guess, say that Ethereum has basically become like Bitcoin, where Ethereum is becoming a settlement layer, the layer 1, and we're going to do everything at layer 2. And the funny thing is that I don't actually think that the Bitcoin design was ever wrong. I think what ended up happening was that Bitcoin as a layer 1 was way too limited, and is still way too limited for a nice layer 2 ecosystem to be built on top. They can only do Lightning Network, really, it's state channels, and they can't even do that well. There's still a lot of problems with that because Bitcoin's layer 1 is so limited. Now, with Ethereum, because it's got an expressive kind of, it's an expressive platform, it has a virtual machine built in, has a smart contracting language and all those sorts of things, we can build fancy solutions like rollups on top of it, and we can keep layer 1 as this fully decentralized and secure settlement layer for rollups, and then do everything else at layer 2, which I've described on the refuel the other day about kind of like the design philosophy around this roll-up-centric roadmap, which to me kind of like says that Ethereum will be and continue to be the center point of this entire ecosystem. Bitcoin can be whatever it wants to be, digital gold or whatever they want to call it these days. These other chains can feed into it. They can bridge in and out of Ethereum, bridge in and out of the Ethereum layer 2s. It's going to be seamless. And as I've discussed before, it's going to be a parallel distribution in terms of, I think, market cap and in terms of like market share and generally. I don't think it's going to be a winner take all. It already isn't a winner take all from a pure market cap and on-chain activity perspective. But at the end of the day, as long as Ethereum continues on the path that it's on right now, it continues building out layer 1 with obviously the merge and then sharding, and then we continue building out the awesome layer 2 ecosystem that we have. I just don't see Ethereum losing its crown to anyone. I think Ethereum is the roll-up centric roadmap for a blockchain is the perfect design. I think that it's taken many years for us to get here, but it is much better than trying to do everything at layer 1. I just don't think that's the correct design for long-term sustainability of these systems. And I'm trying to build, well, not me personally I think that as an ecosystem, as an Ethereum ecosystem, we are trying to build something that lasts for a very long time. We want it to be as sustainable as possible. We want it to potentially last thousands of years as a network and last way longer than kind of like we're alive. And we want it to be able to resist any kind of attacks. And obviously the final boss is nation states going after Ethereum. If we can resist that, then we can resist anything, which I think is really, really cool. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that for now. I've got a lot more other updates to get through today. So Optimism announced that they have doubled their throughput limit on mainnet. This is because they hit their limit the other day. So Arbitrum wasn't the only layer 2 that was getting a lot of usage over the weekend. It was also Optimism. There was a bit of a flow-on effect there. But essentially, they doubled it from 100,000 transactions per day to 200,000 transactions per day before it starts throttling with higher gas prices. So just to give you some context here, Ethereum's layer 1 at maximum, it varies because it depends what transactions are being processed on the network, but I've seen it go as high as 1.6 million transactions a day, and really it tapers out at about that. And unless we raise the gas limit, it kind of stops at about that. So you can see here that these layer 2 networks aren't quite up to kind of like that amount yet, but they are growing. Arbitrum has also grown to, I think, a couple of 100,000 transactions per day over the weekend. And I don't know if they're going to increase their limits anytime soon, but they may. But, Optimism started off at 50K transactions per day. They went to 100K, now they've gone to 200K. So it seems like they're just doing a doubling. So maybe the next one's going to be 400K. But I guess it depends on how much, activity the network is seeing and everything like that as well. But cool to see this. Cool to see there's more capacity on the Optimism network. And they have another big announcement coming this week, as they say here. This isn't the big news that they were teasing. But still worth tweeting about, of course. So yeah, pretty cool to see that happening. Mihailo from Polygon here basically gave a friendly reminder that by saying here that many people are still not aware that NFTs can easily be transferred from Ethereum layer 1 to Polygon's POS chain and vice versa. So the bridge that they have set up for this supports these transfers using a model similar to the one that they used for fungible /ERC20 tokens. So more details can be found in this blog post here, but this is something really cool that I actually didn't know about. Funny enough, I should have known about this, but I didn't. That you could basically bridge these kind of like NFTs directly from L1 to Polygon and vice versa. So if you have an NFT on Polygon and you minted there, you can take it across to Ethereum layer 1 if you want to, and do it the other way if you want to as well. And there's a handy guide in this blog post as well if you want to check that out. And speaking of bridges, James Prestwich from Celo or Celo, I don't exactly know how to say it, but from Celo here put out an announcement today saying that a new bridge has been announced called the Optics Bridge, which now it currently supports Ethereum, Celo, and Polygon. You can bridge any ERC20 token between any supported network, and you can read more on this post here. So what Optics is trying to do and what they say is setting themselves apart is they're basically using a new kind of like, I guess, bridging standard called the Optimistic Interchain Communication Standard. And they describe it here as by saying, unlike other cross-chain communication systems, Optics is neither a custodial bridge, validator-based bridge, nor header relay. Instead, it leverages an optimistic bridging mechanism to enable radically cheaper communication between chains while still preserving decentralization. And additionally, Optics has a few killer features that make bridging easy, such as it connects change in a one-to-N model, making its bridges more like airport hubs. It can be deployed on any smart contracting chain and multiple chains at the same time. It is gas efficient and cheaper than header relays by a factor of 10 times on Ethereum, and it doesn't require any new primitives or elliptic curves to be added to the base layer. So they are selling this as probably the best bridge that is available today. I'm assuming that's what they're kind of going for here. I haven't played around with this bridge just yet. I haven't dived into the documents or anything yet. But this really is, I mean, the holy grail. Not Optics. I mean, like the holy grail of bridges is to have it be like fully trustless and fully decentralized. I don't think it's actually possible to have something as trustless and decentralized as the parent network. So, for example, I don't think you can actually have a bridge that is as secure, as decentralized, and as trustless as Ethereum is, because with bridging, you're always relying on the bridge to network as well. For example, if you bridge from Ethereum to Solana, for example, and something happens on the Solana side, well, that means that it doesn't matter how secure the bridge was or how decentralized it was, the bridge could break due to something happening on the Solana network, such as maybe a hard fork happens or the network goes down or whatever, and the bridge kind of like breaks because of that. And I mean, there's a number of other examples of kind of attack vectors and things like that, but I think really what all these bridge kind of like researchers are trying to do is create something as close as possible to being, totally trustless and secure and decentralized. So Optics is just another kind of like, I guess, like entrant to this kind of game here. You can definitely go check out these blog posts for more details about it. But just generally, I think it's cool to see more bridges coming online. I mean, I've spoken a lot about bridges on the Refuel before. There's plenty of them now. And I think that the more the merrier, because at the end of the day, there's only going to be it's going to be another Paolo distribution, but we want the best ones to win. We want the most secure, decentralized, and trustless bridges to win. And the more there are, the more competition there is, and the better it is for the end user at the end of the day. So Paolo here put out I guess like a Dune analytics dashboard that I have actually been looking for lately that shows the total amount of gas that's being consumed by each of the layer 2 networks on Ethereum. So you can see here that today, I think meaning September 12th, Arbitrum consumed 1% of the total daily gas space for Ethereum. So just Arbitrum, I guess like on September 12th over the weekend, consumed 1% of all block space on Ethereum, which was insane, right? Like that's actually crazy. And you can see here that on September 12th, 1.5% of all block space was consumed by layer 2s on Ethereum, not just Arbitrum, but all of the ones that they're tracking, such as Aztec, Diversify, dYdX, Optimism, Polygon Hermes, SoRare, and ZK Swap. That's crazy. I mean, I've spoken about this before, and where I said that I think layer 1 is going to be just this security, a kind of settlement chain for layer 2s, and eventually layer 2s are going to price out every other user because they're going to be happy paying the highest amount of fees. Because if you saw yesterday when I went through cryptofees.info, Optimism and Arbitrum are earning $200,000 to $300,000 per day of revenue, and because of that, they're happy paying the on-chain fees on Ethereum. They're happy paying $200, $300, $400 per batch. The more these layer 2s kind of get usage, the more fees they're going to generate. So they're more than happy to pay thousands of dollars in transaction fees per batch. And if they start doing these things, every minute, every kind of like 2 minutes, maybe even every block one day, then they're definitely going to price out absolutely everyone from layer 1. Even the whales eventually won't be able to compete with these networks, because you can imagine a layer 2 as a whale, because they're kind of, I guess, bundling up all these transactions, thousands, tens of thousands of transactions that are all happening, depending on, I guess, kind of like the time between batches, and those have like I guess fees associated with them, and then they go to layer one. The layer twos are going to price at everyone. So I think my advice to people who may be worried about this, may be thinking, okay, well, if I'm going to be priced out of layer one permanently, then what can I do? Get on the layer twos as ASAP. Go to Arbitrum, get your funds on Optimism, get your funds on all these other things, get your funds on the Polygon POS chain and stuff like that. Do realize that there's trade-offs as well going from Ethereum layer one. As I've mentioned before, the layer twos have training wheels on them. They're pretty much totally centralized right now. The Polygon POS chain has different security properties to Ethereum as well, because it is it's funny. I always struggle describing what the POS chain is. It's technically not a side chain, but it's technically not a layer two. It's kind of like a hybrid between a side chain, kind of like a layer two, a commit chain, whatever. But I'm not going to get into like the details of that now. But essentially, just be aware that no matter where you go to, if you're going off Ethereum, there are going to be trade-offs, and a lot of these layer twos aren't going to be in their fully decentralized state, where they basically don't have upgradable contracts. They don't have centralized kind of multi-sig. They don't have centralized sequences. That's not going to be the case for a little while, because we're so early. But still, I think it's worth getting onto these layer twos with some funds as well, to make sure that you're not priced out from using kind of like the network on layer one. Once these layer twos really start ramping up, they're gonna. I mean, I think they're gonna be 10% of all kind of gas consumed on Ethereum sooner than we think. Just given the fact that we don't even have, I guess, like direct bridges into most of these things yet from centralized exchanges. The adoption is still happening in the background, I guess, for all these sorts of things. And as the market heats up, activity is just going to heat up as well. So yeah, definitely get yourself onto a layer two. And speaking of that, Curve is now live on Arbitrum. So if you are a Curve user on layer one, you can now use it on layer two. I played around with it today, just using my money on Arbitrum there. I did a few different swaps. I swapped ETH to USDC on Uniswap, and then I went to swap USDC to USDT on Curve. Then I went and swapped that USDT to ETH on Uniswap. And I did all this just as testing. I know there was kind of like more efficient routes here, and it kind of doesn't make sense for me to go to ETH to stablecoin to ETH. But I did it because I just wanted to test out, see the different transaction fees between kind of like the different platforms, and see how well it worked. And Curve worked fine. Like there was nothing wrong with it. And Uniswap obviously worked fine as well. But great to see another kind of like, I guess, DeFi blue chip or I guess like top DeFi app live on the Arbitrum network here. And speaking of, I guess, like centralized exchanges having bridges into these layer 2 networks. So Coinbase announced, and I went through this on a refuel, that they're going to be supporting the Polygon POS chain, and then Optimism, Arbitrum, and Starkware, and I'm sure other kind of like layer 2s in the future as well. But if you're using Coinbase Wallet right now, then you don't need to kind of like wait for Coinbase. You can basically use their Coinbase Wallet on your mobile phone and be able to natively switch between the different networks here on their app. So you can see here that Arbitrum, Optimism, Polygon, XDAI, and some of the other EVM compatible chains like Avalanche and Phantom are both supported here for mainnet capacity as well. So no need to add a custom network on your mobile wallet here, which is really, really cool. And final thing about layer 2 is Immutable tweeted out something today called where they said no gas on Immutable X L2 but still 100% Ethereum. Now I wanted to focus on something that Paulinho said here, which I think it's very important for people to understand. So he said it's not 100% Ethereum until transaction call data is also on Ethereum. Immutable X is great, and off-chain data availability is the right solution for low-value NFTs, but some transparency will be appreciated, at least until you become a volition and give users the option. So essentially what Paulinho is saying here is that Immutable X isn't a ZK rollup, it's a Validium. Now, I've described the differences between this before, but just to recap you on this, what a Validium does is that it doesn't actually post its data to the Ethereum layer 1 chain. It keeps the data off-chain as part of a data availability committee, which is just a bunch of nodes running, keeping the data available for Immutable X in this example here, which means that it is not 100% Ethereum, because if those data availability nodes were to go offline and you can't get that the data from there, you could have you could fall into a position where you can't get your funds back, or you can't get your NFTs or whatever, and that's just basically the design of it, which is fine because as Polina says, yeah, this is fine for low value NFTs because at the end of the day, this is how you scale it on I guess like a layer 2 where the transaction fees are basically free. They are free on Immutable X right now because they're subsidizing it, but I mean the cost for them is very cheap. It's like pennies on not even pennies, like less than a cent sort of thing. But then Polina goes on to say, should be transparent about this, that this isn't actually a ZK rollup, it's a Validium. But in the future, there's actually an even better model called Volition, which Starkware is developing, where it will give users to choose where their data is stored. So they can either store it in Immutable's data availability committee, or they can store it on a kind of like a network like Arweave or Filecoin potentially, or they can store it themselves. So essentially, that gives users control over their core data, so they don't have to rely on a third party. But if they, if you lose access to it yourself, then you potentially can't get access to your funds either. But it's still a better kind of like solution than Validium. But again, it may not be considered 100% Ethereum. I think 100% Ethereum might be something that's considered like the data is actually on Ethereum, where these layer 2s batch and put the core data on Ethereum as well. But that's always going to be more expensive, I believe, than just like a pure kind of like Validium or Volition here. But still good to understand the difference between them and understand why there's a cost difference there as well. So the Ethereum name service announced today that they've chosen a kind of I guess they're a company maybe, or a kind of project called SpruceID to lead the effort to standardize sign-in with Ethereum. Now, I've discussed sign-in with Ethereum before, but essentially what it is basically a way to standardize what dApps are already doing organically in Web3 across the entire kind of like web. You know how you sign in with Google, sign in with Twitter, sign in with Facebook, sign in with whatever on different websites. This is basically an initiative to standardize this so that you can sign in with your Ethereum wallet, because your Ethereum wallet is essentially a public-private key pair, so a username and password, I guess, for lack of a better comparison there. And SpruceID is going to be leading the effort here on the ENS side to kind of like commissioned by ENS to lead the effort here on sign-in with Ethereum. So if you want more details about this and how it's going to work, you can go read their announcement blog post here and what they're kind of like working on. Currently, they've already begun delivery on the best practices survey, user research, a spec draft, and reference implementation. Not sure how long this is going to take. I don't think they've given any dates here, but it's really, really awesome to see movement on this. I do think that one day we could get to a position where the web is basically all sign-in with Ethereum, and there's no need for you to have like a username and password for every kind of like site, or to sign in with Google or Facebook, any of these centralized kind of solutions. You can sign in with your Ethereum wallet and keep your identity and keep everything fully decentralized, on your own kind of device, which I think is really, really cool. All right, so speaking of kind of like the decentralization, Lucas here from Gnosis put out a tweet today saying that Apple is blocking the release of Gnosis Safe's new mobile app, mobile app update because they display NFTs in it. And he goes on to say, after 2 weeks of back and forth, I felt that we needed to talk publicly about this to raise awareness. And you can see this thread here where he says 2 weeks ago, they submitted a new version of the Gnosis Safe mobile app to the App Store, and they got the following response that basically says, please provide detailed answers to the following questions in reply to this message, which is, what are the collectibles users can store in the app? Is this to store NFTs? And then essentially the next day we got they got a questionable response again, basically about in-app purchases. And essentially this is going back to, I guess, like Apple kind of like not liking the fact that the NFTs, I guess, through Gnosis Safe can be, well, not just the NFTs, but like tokens in general can be bought by using Gnosis Safe instead of going through the Apple kind of like App Store and using in-app purchases through the Apple App Store so that Apple gets a cut from it. And then he says here, they tried resubmitting the update again with a clearer update description, but no luck. They basically got the same kind of response back here. And then, he goes on to say, this shows how access to Web3 still relies heavily on gatekeepers like Apple. It's an industry-wide problem, as the same arguments apply to any wallet displaying NFTs or games making use of NFTs. We need to find better ways to make Web3 accessible on mobile permissionlessly. this has always been like a massive problem with, I guess, the fact that we have really only two app stores, the Play Store and the App Store, that have like a duopoly on what users can access on their mobile devices. I know that with Android, you can sideload apps and you can just download the APK and things like that. On Apple, I mean, if you jailbreak, you can do that, but I mean, most people don't do that anymore. But still, like this is, I mean, I guess like on Android, it's still a power user thing to sideload apps, even though it's easier. And on Apple, it's definitely like a hardcore power user thing to sideload apps onto your device. So, I mean, I don't know what the solution is here. Is it creating a kind of like new open source kind of piece of hardware and software that can go together that can kind of like create a new mobile ecosystem and then create like a fully decentralized app store? I don't think so. Like, it's very, very hard to create a mobile device that competes with, I guess, Apple, Samsung, all the heavy hitters. It's even harder to create one that is using open source hardware. And on top of that, it is even more difficult to create an app store and to get people using that and to get developers kind of like deploying their apps to it. It is not an easy task at all. So either we hope that Apple kind of loosens their policies around this, or we have to kind of route around them, which basically means instead of going through the App Store, we basically tell people to use their web browsers on their devices to kind of like do these different things and use these different kind of things in kind of like web browsers and stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, you can read this full tweet there. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below. It's an industry-wide problem. It's something that we're not going to get, I think, like an answer to or clarity on or any kind of like good outcome with for quite a while, but still something to keep an eye on as we kind of like progress through, I guess, the adoption cycle of crypto. But on that note, I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you everyone again for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.